Thinking about moving to the Annapolis area and you want to know the actual cost of living here? If so, this video is for you. Let's dive in. First up, the electric bill. Now look, this is going to depend how do you keep the temperature in your house to how big your home is to how efficient your home is. Now I called BG&E, the local power company here, and basically you can give them the exact address of the property that you're kind of eyeing up and they will tell you what the average bill is for the last year. For one more point of reference, for my own home here with Chelsea, we are running about 3,000 square feet above grade. We have an unfinished basement. Then we charge our Tesla. We have an open floor plan with tall ceilings on every floor. And again, we're at that $330 a month level. So not too bad considering that we have 2 heat pumps, an open floor plan, and charging our car. Now again, if you have something that's a little bit smaller or maybe not charging a car, you should expect to see that a little bit less. Next up is your water and sewer bill. Now, assuming that you're going to be on public water, you're running probably about $140 a quarter. Now, obviously, if you have a smaller place, a little condo, maybe some of the water is already paid for, or you're just not using that much water because you don't have that many people living in the home, maybe you're at 50 or 75 bucks. That being said, the averages, when you look up the stats, they do run about $140 for the 2 per quarter. Now, I will say there is a chunk of Anne Arundel County and some of the stuff that goes towards Southern Maryland that people are on well water and septic. So for example, that's what myself and Chelsea, we have well and septic. So obviously we don't have to spend any money on the septic most of the time, just have to pay to get it cleaned out, etc. And then for the well water itself, we do actually pay someone to come, add the salt, tweak it, service it, etc. But I probably do that about every 6 months, and we're around that 130, 150 bucks maybe, every 6 months. You might have some other things, some extra filters, so reverse osmosis, so on and so forth that you do once a year, etc. That adds a little bit, but overall, the water and sewer here, very, very affordable. Next up, we have our property taxes. Now, for just some really quick math, you can figure about 1.1% for your property taxes. Now, that's overall, right? I mean, that gives you a good rough estimate. But if you are in the city limits, it's going to be closer to 1.5%. So there are some nuances here depending on where you actually want to have your home. But for easy math, if the assessment is at $640,000, you should plan on paying about $7 grand annually in your taxes. All right, next up we have our property insurance or our homeowners insurance. They mean the same thing. And if you look up the county, from some of the data I saw, it looked like it's about $1,000 a year for your homeowners insurance. Now, if we talk about the greater Annapolis area and we focus on stuff that's a little bit more expensive, I'm going to say they range probably closer between $1,200 and $1,600 a year. So I think a couple things have happened. One, with all the storms, everything that we've seen, numbers have A, pushed up. And B, of course, if you're buying a 3, 4, 5,000 square foot home, you should expect them to be closer to that $1,600 mark versus $1,000 or $1,200 mark. If you're buying your starter townhouse or condo or something like that, you're hopefully going to be closer to that $1,200 or maybe even towards $1,000. Now, next little twist here is flood insurance. Obviously, we've had some crazy weather the past couple of years, and some of these storms have done a lot of damage. With that, the premiums have gone up. Not only that, but there has been changes dealing with flood insurance. So if you find yourself in a place that is not required to have flood insurance, but you would like to have flood insurance, it seems the average amount is around $700 a year to get that flood insurance coverage. Now, if you are required, that number is all over the map because it depends on a lot of things, from the elevation of your house to the proximity of the water to how expensive it is to replace, etc., etc. And I'm going to tell you that the range is anywhere from about $1,000 to $5,000 a year. Of course, it can go up if you have some of the really, really crazy stuff. Now, that being said, what's an average amount? Well, probably about $3 grand. Okay, so big takeaway is starter home. Think towards that $1,200. If you want flood insurance, maybe $700. If you have something that's a little bit more expensive, a little bit more bigger, you're running at that $1,600 mark. And then again, if you're required to get flood insurance, probably plan around $3 grand, give or take, depending on the exact circumstances that that home has. Now, I know we just talked about homeowners insurance. Let's take a quick moment and just touch on car insurance. And here's what I'm going to say is, overall, the Annapolis area, the insurance isn't too bad, right? Like a lot of that stuff goes back to crime rates and carjackings and all these things. And what I want to say is, overall, our rates are really not that bad here. That being said, that's really if you are older than, let's say, 30. The rates, if you have someone who's 18, 20, etc., they are crazy high. But the thing is, that is super high through the entire nation. That's not something that's special to the Annapolis area. So unfortunately, they can get as high as about $5,000, where if you are, in your 30s or 40s, and you don't have like a DUI or anything else, you should expect the rates to be in the lower 1,000 type mark, right? Could be $1,100, $1,200, somewhere in there, depending on how expensive your car is and, the different policies, etc. that you get. All right, I can't talk about all that insurance and the water here and not mention boater's insurance. Now, unfortunately, I only have one point of reference for that, which is my own boat, which is a 2018 wakeboarding boat. And we basically pay $100 a month for the coverage. Now, I love our boat, so we have a pretty decent policy on it. Obviously, if you have something older, a little bit less expensive, it may be cheaper. If you have something more expensive, it may be more money. That's my only data point on that one, unfortunately. But I did want to mention it because it is a cost of living here if you plan on buying a boat. One quick little side note, if you are going to have a boat in the area, I highly recommend checking out a company like towboatus.com. Now, I haven't had to use them yet, but one thing that's pretty neat is they have a subscription model, kind of like AAA, where you pay a small fee for the year, and if you need them, you can get some help, because if you're in a pinch and you have to get an emergency tow, that can get kind of stupid expensive when you're stuck on the water. All right, so when we compare to the rest of the country, really our cost of living here doesn't seem so bad so far. I mean, we haven't really dived into the details, but basically our gasoline, our groceries, our transportation, a lot of these things are fairly similar to the rest of the country. But when I looked up some of the stats, it seemed that we are at about 25% higher for the overall cost of living here in the Annapolis area versus the rest of the country. And the reason is the cost of housing. The housing here is very expensive. So that is where we see this big jump in pricing. And that goes into then, of course, your property taxes, or if you're renting, all those things. The housing expensive is very expensive here in the greater Annapolis area. So again, the big difference here in the cost of living really has to deal with the affordability of the home itself. So when we break it down, let's talk about first at the county level. The median sold price in Anne Arundel County is $415,000. The median sold price in Annapolis is $475,000. Now, again, that takes the median, right? So that takes your small condos, your townhouses, and your larger homes. Don't confuse that with our average cost is actually close to $640,000 in the Annapolis area. So again, if you're trying to buy, a good 3, 4, 5,000 square foot home in the Annapolis area, yeah, you're spending 6, 7, 800,000 plus, right? I mean, you might even get into the multi-million. If you're trying to buy your first starter home and you're getting a smaller townhouse or condo, obviously that number is going to be lower. But again, this is one of the biggest factors on the cost of living in the Annapolis area is the housing cost itself. For more awesome tips about living in the Annapolis area, go ahead and like and subscribe. I can't wait to see you in the next video.